So this isn't going to be your normal video of how to get abs. I'm not going to say that you have to stick to this specific ab routine or be on this specific diet to get a six pack. But instead, I want to share some practical tips that help me from being overweight to having a six pack. And the most interesting thing is that you don't even necessarily have to train abs in order to get a six pack. And I'll cover why that's the case in part 2 of this video. So first, let me tell you a bit about my story and how I went from being overweight to ultimately having a pretty well-defined midsection now. Unfortunately, I don't have any photos of what my stomach or belly used to look like back in the day because I was so ashamed or insecure of what I looked like. Back in the day, I was a very chubby kid, and I remember looking at a photo of me one day and thinking, wow, something needs to change. So I ended up looking and researching into how to actually go about losing fat. The basic upshot was that you need to eat less food. And something I had realized after cutting the amount of food that I was eating down was that when I was overweight, every time I ate, I would literally stuff myself full of food to the point where after every meal I ate, I felt full. I felt almost lethargic to the point of being sick. And it didn't even register with me that that isn't normal, nor is it healthy. And that brings me to part 1 of how to get abs. It's that 80% of your journey to getting abs lies in your diet. So I think, as we all know, our abs are covered in fat, and we want to lose fat in order to be able to see our abs. In order to lose fat, you have to stop eating so much. Something that I realized after reducing the amount of food I ate was that I could be halfway into a meal and realize that I was no longer hungry. Accordingly, I should just stop eating because you're not hungry anymore. By introducing more food, you're just going to be more prone to putting on more fat or not even lose fat. So as I was talking about before, you don't need to eat at every meal to the point where you feel full. It's okay to just stop eating when you no longer feel hungry. Not being hungry and feeling full are two different feelings. And if you stop eating when you're no longer hungry compared to when you're physically full, you're going to see a lot better benefits with losing fat. And it can be tricky to do because sometimes you just mindlessly eat, but you have to stay kind of present to some extent and realize throughout your meal whether you're actually no longer hungry. And if you're no longer hungry halfway through what you'd normally eat, then it's at that point when you should stop eating. And when you do that, you're going to see such faster fat loss. The second practical tip I want to give with regards to diet is that a problem for me was that at most meals, there would be a bulk amount of the meal prepared. So for example, it'd be like in a huge dish. And then it's from that dish where I'd take food and put it onto my own plate, and that's how I'd eat. That was the method of eating. And I think that's true in most households. But the problem with that is that you can constantly just keep taking from that main dish to the point where you overeat, because it's kind of like an unlimited pool of food that you can keep taking from. And when you do that, you overeat. So if you can just take from that dish and fill up your plate once, and don't fill your plate up ever again after finishing what's on your plate, then I think that way you're going to limit how many calories you're eating, because then you're not subject to this kind of unlimited food source where you can continually overeat. And if you're already filling up your plate just once, then you just have to put less food onto your plate. So something that I would always do back in the day was I'd take 3 scoops of rice and put it onto my plate. But then after I realized I wanted to make a change, I cut it in half and I made it 1.5 scoops. And that's just an example of something that you can do to limit how much food you're eating. And so the second part of the equation to abs is, do you need to train them frequently, or do you even need to train them at all? The answer is that it depends, but a non-negotiable in obtaining a six-pack is just lifting weights in general. So you definitely still need to commit to some form of weight training to get abs. But the reason why specific targeted ab training is not necessarily required to get a six pack is that your core muscles and ab muscles are indirectly trained whenever you do other forms of exercises, whenever you are lifting weights in other scenarios. For example, when you're doing squats or when you're doing bench press. While that specific exercise seems to target your legs or your chest, because your body needs to stabilize itself while it does that exercise, your core is what stabilizes your body. And so therefore, it's indirectly getting trained whenever you do those types of exercises. But at the same time, if you want to build your ab muscles, then it doesn't make sense to not train them. Because obviously, if you want to bring up your chest, you do more bench press and you train it multiple times every week. And so the same logic applies to your abs. If you want a more defined midsection, then you should train your abs multiple times per week. So in that sense, I would definitely recommend ab training if they're a specific point of your physique that you want to bring up, which I think is the case for most people. You can definitely see how my abs have become more defined over time by committing to ab training. But I will admit, ab training is something I haven't really focused on too much in my lifting journey. Of course, I'll hit abs maybe once a week, but it was never too much of a priority in terms of my goals, and it kind of just gradually came over time, which is where I think that indirect training of your abs can contribute to having a six pack in the long term. And therefore, you don't really need to train your abs day in, day out, even if you want a six pack. But that being said, if they are a specific muscle group that you want to bring up, then definitely train them multiple times per week, just as you would any other body part. So those are some practical tips that can help you get a six pack. If you found this video helpful at all, please subscribe. I'm trying to hit 1K, and drop a like, comment, all that kind of stuff if you want to as well.